This is for the Weather and Atmosphere Study Guide. Question number 1 on the study guide is what is weather and how do we measure weather? Weather is the current conditions. We can measure weather with wind speed, with temperatures, the amount of precipitation we receive. What are some weather disasters that occur in our area? What are the chances of the disaster occurring in the next 12 months? We took some surveys asking people about weather disasters that have occurred. The 4 best ones that I can think of would be a tornado, and I would say that there's a medium risk. A flood, I would say, has a high risk, and my evidence for having a flood as a high risk would be 1, because in the surveys, a lot of people reported that there have been floods in previous years, and 2, because we live beside the White River, which causes a large amount of evaporation, and as we know, evaporation, once it goes into the air, turns into clouds and then precipitates, which could cause floods. And then number 3, my third piece of evidence for why floods occur in our area is because of our climate. We have a severe climate, which means that we get varying amounts of precipitation. Some years we get a lot, and some years we do not. So that my reason would be all those pieces of evidence show that a flood could have a high risk in our area. Blizzard and thunderstorm. Please do not say hurricane because we do not live near an ocean. And an earthquake is not a weather disaster because it's caused by plate tectonics, not by the atmosphere. Number 3, what is climate? How is it different than weather? Climate is just weather that occurs over a long period of time. It's kind of the average over an area. Describe different types of climate. Tropical, what you need to know is there are hot temperatures and there are large amounts of precipitation. Severe, varying temperatures and varying precipitation, that's kind of where we live. Arid, obviously arid climates, if it's like a cold desert, it could be cold or it could be really hot, but the idea is that there's little or no precipitation in an arid or dry climate. What factors affect climate? Could you describe them? Ocean currents affect climate because they carry heat onto the land, and then the wind kind of takes the heat from there. And then also when the land heats faster than the water does, and the water is able to hold the heat, that helps for heat to circulate differently around the earth. Number 6, most of the earth is covered with water. Therefore, most of the water on earth is where, and what does that mean about most of the Earth's water? Most of Earth's water is in the oceans, which means that it is salt water. And one thing about salt water is it's not carried through the water cycle, but the water cycle helps regulate salt. When we have runoff, it runs off the land and picks up salt that carries it to the ocean and different things like that. So the water cycle and water does help regulate the salt on the earth. Water takes longer to heat, but it stores heat that it receives. That's important because it allows water to carry heat and help affect weather and climate. Throughout the water cycle, water can be found as a solid, a liquid, or a gas, depending upon if it's just been through evaporation, it's in gas form. If it's a cloud, it's in liquid form. And then if it's cold outside, when a cloud releases the water, it could be a solid. Describe the following. Evaporation is when water heats up because of the sun. The sun heats it up and turns it into vapor. Condensation, water vapor cools to liquid, which forms clouds. The clouds hold the water. The wind helps keep the clouds up in the air, and then when the clouds become too heavy, they release water in the form of precipitation. Runoff is where the water runs off or flows off the land, maybe down a hill or through a stream. Infiltration is where the water will seep into the ground to become groundwater, which is water that's underground. And then this is the water cycle: evaporation, condensation, it turning back into a cloud, precipitation, the cloud releasing the water, infiltration, it's sinking in to become groundwater, or running off the land. What powers the water cycle? The sun. The sun is what starts the evaporation to pull the water into the air. And then as water passes through the water cycle, what happens to the water? It helps change and regulate the levels of salt. What gases make up the majority of the atmosphere? Nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor. There's actually a small amount of carbon dioxide. We know in some activities that we've looked at that carbon dioxide is in small amounts currently. It is slowly starting to increase because of the pollution that we have, but nitrogen and oxygen and water vapor are the main players. What can you tell me about the layers of the atmosphere? These are the 4 layers you need to know about: the thermosphere, mesosphere, stratosphere, and troposphere. The troposphere is at the bottom. It's where we live. It's where weather occurs. It also has the highest pressure. If you think about if you're on the bottom of a pyramid, you're going to be having the most amount of pressure put on you, pushed down on you. Versus the thermosphere, it's at the top, thermo because it's the hottest, but also it has the lowest amount of pressure because it's on the top. It doesn't really have a whole lot pushing down on it. So here's what you need to know about the atmosphere. As we go up and down the layers of the atmosphere, temperature and pressure change. There is a Kahoot if you would like to play the Kahoot in the weather study area. Otherwise, this concludes our weather review.